Hi there, I'm Sophie Jones, Programme Manager at Building with Nature. Building with Nature is a charitable company seeking to mainstream high quality green infrastructure through placemaking. We're aiming to raise the bar for UK industry and maximise benefits for both people and the natural world through supporting and championing best practice. And we're fast becoming the go-to green infrastructure standards framework and accreditation mechanism for residential and commercial development. I'm delighted to be talking today with Clare Hebbes. Clare is a member of the Building with Nature board and an active supporter of the company's approach to nature-friendly development. Over the last 20 years, Clare's work has focused on major projects, holding responsibility for design, management and activation of the public realm for some of the most significant urban regeneration schemes across London and Europe, including the development of King's Cross, Heathrow Terminal 5 and Battersea Power Station. Clare is currently the Director of Development at the London Legacy Development Corporation, overseeing the development of the Olympic Village. Hi there, Clare. Great to have this opportunity to talk with you. How are you today?
Hi, Sophie. I'm well, thank you. I'm enjoying the slightly sunnier weather at the moment, which is helpful when it comes to getting away from screens.
Yes, definitely. So the Building with Nature approach is all about creating better outcomes for people and for the natural world. And the COVID crisis has certainly changed people's experience of their environment close to home. It's really been creating a demand for nature on the doorstep. And there are calls for government and industry to build back better, build back greener. So I'm keen to hear a bit more about your experiences of lockdown and explore what building back greener means and how we can do that. So first off, can I ask, how did you and your family use nature to support your well-being through lockdown?
I think one of the things I was most surprised at was by not going to work, how little I suddenly went out for the first week. And you kind of very quickly become cooped up in one space. And then obviously within a week or so, you become very appreciative of being able to get out and just, go to a shop to buy the essentials at the time, and using that ability to go out for your daily exercise. We're very lucky where we are, is that within a short cycle ride or a walk, we've got access to green space, open space, and also quite a lot of shops. So we very much used those green spaces as both a place that we could go and get out and get some semblance of normality, actually. Once you get into the space, it's possible to forget all of the other things that are going on. And of course, the walkable links to get to go and be out by the kind of daily essentials. For me, it was always the search for pasta. How do you feed teenage children without a large quantity of pasta? And so being able to walk to different shops made a really big difference, actually, to both sanity and those practical problems we all had.
Yeah, so actually sort of really, the green space helping to bring that sense of normality. Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people have been feeling that as well, that it's really helped their mental well-being, that sense of sanity. Yeah. And so thinking then about how the COVID crisis has changed the market's understanding of good placemaking and the design priorities of developers. I'm just wondering if you can tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So I think developers are always obviously thinking, what are their customers thinking? And certainly at the beginning of the crisis, there was a lot of discussion about whether this is the end of cities, whether people will ever go back into larger buildings. And I have to say, I don't wholly hold with that kind of dramatic change. But I think what it has meant is that a huge number of people, like both of us, we spent our times living in our local areas much more, using the local amenities, and just walking around, finding. I know we found we were trying different cycle routes, trying different paths that we'd never used before, and discovering different places. And I think that's been a fairly consistent experience of a lot of people, and so people have come to either appreciate that their area provides that very well, or in some cases doesn't. And I think one of the elements that's come out has been actually quite an inequity in people's living experiences and local amenities, inevitably that is going to be something that people think about in the future. You know, the local area, we do have some areas that are simply dormitories, and they don't provide those facilities. And going forward, it's hard to imagine that people will actually accept that anymore. And so I think, you know, expecting your local area to be able to provide some green space, to provide those walkable links, to provide local amenities, is going to be much more, you know, the norm.
Yeah, definitely. And so I'm interested to know how you see building with nature and the building with nature approach aligning with that shift in priorities.
Your building with nature gives a brilliant framework for being able to incorporate those, the green links, the green infrastructure and nature into any development. And what I love about the framework there is that it's not only theoretical, but it actually is quite a flexible but very practical approach, non-prescriptive, and importantly, it not only deals with the theoretical stage through the design, but is actually about how a place functions in practice once real people start to move in, because real people tend to make things slightly messy, and you can never quite control how they might really behave and really respond to all those great ideas you had at the design stage. And I think that ability to reflect and learn how the reality compared to the theory is incredibly valuable, and will provide lots of opportunities in the future to share all those learnings.
Great, yeah. And you have a lot of experience in making urban spaces better places for people to live. So what can you tell us about how we can make cities places where people can really thrive? So building on that idea of having local amenities and local green space, and not having these sort of areas that are just effectively dormitories, you know, how can placemaking really support the health and well-being of people and communities?
Yeah, I mean, there's a big difference between that kind of idea of surviving and actually thriving. And it's quite hard to crystallize what creates that difference. But for me, there's probably three kind of key areas. I think the first one is around social connection. And I kind of go back to the fact you can't force people to connect, you can't force people to talk to each other. But what, as developers and designers, we can do is we can create the opportunities, or we can facilitate those connections. And for me, a lot of that's about those open public spaces. I think creating a space that's democratic, that people feel comfortable in, and that they feel comfortable talking to neighbours, is a massive part of creating a community that then provides that basis for well-being and for thriving. I think I come back, I've talked about walkable and being cyclable already, but I do think that's really important. And again, it partly is about social connections, and it's about creating perhaps a smaller place that you tend to meet the same people. And that's because you're walking there. And so instead of, having a catchment area of 1 million people, you've got a catchment area of a few thousand people. And so you're much more likely to be part of a community in that way, as well as the obvious benefits of simply, if you don't have to get in a car or get on a bus to go somewhere and you can just walk, it not only saves you time, it makes you fitter, and it is genuinely generally a kind of nicer way of living. And then I always come back to green space, and I think there's a increasing body of evidence that shows how much green space actually does genuinely impact your well-being. And I've seen some studies where people compared spending time in green spaces, not the kind of manicured stuff you get on some developments, but slightly wilder green space, or just slightly messy around the edges even. And it can have the same impact on your kind of restoration as meditation. And I think just being in nature and having having green space around you is phenomenally important for well-being, which is part of that thriving rather than surviving piece.
Great. Yeah, and I think that that idea about actually connecting people together and connecting people to nature, those are sort of the foundation really for health and well-being. As you say, there's so much evidence out there now to really support that. And so how can the building with nature standards help local authorities to deliver places that support the health and well-being of the people and communities they're there to help?
Again, I think it's about providing a structure, and providing a way that that local authorities can include within their plan a perhaps slightly more directive approach to green infrastructure, but very much about providing the knowledge and providing the resources in terms of information to be able to incorporate green infrastructure in an intelligent way.
Great. Yeah. Well, Claire, it's been really helpful, informative to be able to talk with you, and thanks so much for sharing your thoughts and expert knowledge with us.
Been lovely speaking with you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I wish you and your family well as lockdown's finally lifting, and yeah, if you'd like to find out more about the Building with Nature approach, our green infrastructure standards and our accreditation scheme, please check out the Building with Nature website at buildingwithnature.org.uk. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you.